Well, hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven, and we're joined today by Karen Martin. She is the president of TKMG. More recently, she's founder and president of TKMG Academy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. She's the author of a number of books, award-winning books, including The Outstanding Organization and Clarity First. So I think we're going to have a great conversation. And Karen, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to hear your story. I'm sure it's a good story. I'm sure you've been reflecting on it. So what would you say, Karen, is your favorite mistake?
I'm going to take it back to when I decided to leave corporate and go out on my own. And what had happened was I was being groomed to be a vice president, and I wanted very badly to be a vice president in title back then. It was interesting that in reflecting back on it, how much it was about the title and how much I, eventually deviated from that, and that wasn't important. But what happened was I was about to be named vice president over a new, would be like a mini division of the organization. And it just wasn't feeling right on so many levels. I'd been there 4 years. We built this thing from ground up. It was very, very fast paced, very rapid growth. I was exhausted. And the responsibilities I was going to have didn't really feel right. And I went home on a Friday night after my last compensation conversation and was driving back to my then apartment in Santa Monica on the ocean. And I was like, it just doesn't feel right. So I got up all the groceries for the weekend, locked myself in, and I thought, reflected. I went in on Monday morning and resigned. And everybody was shocked. I was the first employee hired for this particular branch of a larger company that had started. And I put my heart and soul into the organization. And almost immediately, I learned that it was going to go public, and I was going to be losing out on a fair amount of stock and financial gain from that. But what happened was actually after I resigned, the COO, who I was really good friends with and was my boss, told me that I would hate consulting. He asked me what I was going to do. And I said, I don't know, I guess consulting. And he said, you're going to hate that. You like to control everything and you won't have any control. And I took that to heart. And he ended up being a little bit right on that for the first couple of years of consulting. But what happened through that, so I felt like I made the mistake of leaving when I did, once they went public and there was all this stuff. But then I realized, it's really not ultimately about money. It really isn't. It's really about happiness and loving your work. And I came to absolutely love consulting, would not ever want to change it for anything. And so it seemed like a mistake at a time, but it really wasn't. It turned out very well.
Well, that's good. And maybe we can dig into the story a little bit. So if I heard you right, you learned about this IPO after you had resigned. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
And
I was gone for a couple of months, I think. I don't remember the exact time frame. So I was gone, and everyone, of course, called me and said, Karen, why'd you leave? And I said, oh my. Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if you'd learned about it like immediately after, where there was an opportunity to reconsider. No, it didn't.
No, it was long enough afterwards that, I don't know what would have happened. That's an interesting question. What would have happened if I called them up and said, can I come back? I probably wouldn't have qualified for it though.
Maybe we'll start a podcast series called What Would Have Happened?
Yeah, exactly. I like that. I love this podcast theme, by the way.
Well, so say more about that.
What I love
about of favorite mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting to think about life in framing it different ways, and mistakes is one way to frame it. And the other way to frame it, and I, view it this way in business and working with clients too, is that, it's a pearl, it's a gem, it's a lesson. Lessons are always good, and they're not always, easy, and it can be quite painful at times, but we don't grow hardly at all when life is just easy breezy. We grow when we get thrown a curveball, or we rethink things, and we see the outcomes of some of our actions or words or whatever. And so I tend not to be someone that thinks about life in terms of mistakes, rather just, a gap, to be closed in the case of business and things like that. And but that is one that I thought about for many years.
Mhm.
And it really wasn't until you invited me on, I started really thinking back and reflecting and thinking that was a big one, that it really hurt at the time.
Mhm. But I guess, like, it turned out for the better. I'm curious to explore a little bit your colleague or whoever it was who said, Karen, you'll hate consulting. What
Mm.
what was that? What were those first couple of years like, and how did you get past maybe some sort of discomfort, or was it just a matter of being new to consulting, or did you make some changes in your consulting approach that led you to be more comfortable with it?
Yeah, good question. So I think one thing was that what had been internal, and I had been, overseeing a pretty large area. So I did have control over what we did or didn't do, and things like that. And it was hard to go into a consulting role and see so clearly, what the potential actually is, and maybe learning that the clients just weren't there yet, and they weren't, and I mean, I'm saying it in past tense, it's present tense too. They're just not there yet. And so one of the things that I learned to do, I think quite successfully, is to meet the client where they're at.
Hmm.
And, early in my consulting, so I've been at it now 25, 6 years. And early on, it was, my agenda in a way, because I saw the potential. And then, I had to just go through years of understanding that's not my role. It's not my agenda, it's their agenda, meet them where they're at. And so, I had to relax. And once I relaxed into that, it's actually really liberating, to be able to see the potential and be a good teacher and explain, what life could be like, and then let the client, kind of make a decision on their own on whether they want to go there or not. And then if they don't want to go there, it's not on me, really. If I've done a good job as a teacher, it's really just, they're just not there yet. It's not the right timing, or whatever it might be. So I find it actually, quite liberating in a way,
Yeah.
to not have that need to control. I had lots of control issues way back when. Many would argue I still do, but boy, not compared to before.
Different mistake.
Yeah. I mean, I had a tremendous fear of flying, and it was all about control. And I was in mental health business, behavioral health business for a while. And I was flying to a meeting with the psychiatrist that was our medical director. And he just like nailed it. He's like, "Oh, you have white knuckle flying." And I said, "Yes, I do." He goes, "You're afraid of that's fear of control. I mean, that's fear of giving up control. Almost always." I said, "Really?" And I started thinking about it. It's like, yeah, I didn't trust the pilot. And so once I started, giving over my fear to the pilot, I love flying. I miss it so much during COVID.
Right. Yeah, I mean, do you feel the same way if you're in the back of an Uber or a Lyft or a town car or a taxi?
No, for some reason, I know what the math is, but for some reason, I think it's just so much more dire if the pilot makes a mistake than if a driver makes a mistake. That no, I don't have any backseat driving tendencies, I don't think.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I want to talk a little bit about your books and the things that you shared in those books, things that you've learned in doing the research. So, looking at your book, The Outstanding Organization, are there things that come to mind, even, directly or tangentially from your book, and what you view as an outstanding organization, the traits and characteristics? Do you see connections to the ideas of being open about mistakes, or learning from mistakes, or reflecting?
Yeah, hugely. One of the organizations I profile in the book toward the end is the Blue Angels.
Mm-hmm.
And, they just really embody every element of what I feel is an outstanding organization, which I broke into clarity, focus, discipline, and engagement. And boy, they nail that, all four of those. And one of the things that they're really good at, and all the other organizations that I've worked with or had an opportunity to visit and things like that, that really do excel, are ones that embrace problems. They're not hiding them. The wise leader is saying all the time, what's not working well, what do we need to work on, and those kinds of things. So yeah, I think there's a pretty strong tie between performance and the ability and interest in seeing errors of or defects of any sort, which a mistake technically is.
Sure. Yeah, and I think we're of the same mindset when there's not a culture when people where they feel safe. If they don't feel safe to speak up about mistakes, it just drives things underground, and then we don't learn, and we can't really become an outstanding organization if we're not making progress that way. So it seems like those cultural foundations are really important.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of ties this all together, this whole concept of clarity, which is a book that you're probably going to mention as well, the clarity of knowing the truth about a situation is quite liberating, even if it's a very difficult truth. And organizations that hide problems are just very content living in a very ambiguous environment. And not only is it soul sapping, it's very bad on productivity. Every minute or every second you spend trying to figure things out is a minute that you're not adding value to a customer.
Sure.
And it really adds up over time. So I think a lot of, disengaged employees are just tired of trying to figure stuff out, that if you just shine a light on everything, whether it's good or bad, it's just, it's a much easier place to be. I heard this thing it was Lean Enterprise Institute. Yesterday's post said something about WX. It's like a riff on customer experience, CX, and work experience. And I was like, I love that. That should be the new thing. Like we should really be talking about the work experience, and hiding problems and mistakes and dealing with them in punitive ways is not at all a recipe for outstanding performance.
Right. And yeah, you use that word punitive. I was going to come back to when you were talking about the characteristics that you talked about in your book, The Outstanding Organization. Discipline. Like, it's interesting that word, like many words, has a couple of different meanings, right? There's I'm going to discipline somebody.
Right.
I'm going to discipline them for a mistake, whether it's really the fault of an individual or, more often than not, why are we disciplining an individual for a systemic problem? But then there's being disciplined. And I think it's great when you see an organization where people are disciplined about problem solving, disciplined about taking time to reflect in formal ways. What are your thoughts around? The other book Karen wrote was Clarity First. Does reflection help provide clarity? Are there specific methods that you're a fan of for reflection, or is it kind of an informal process?
Yeah, reflection to me can be as easy and quick as, just taking a moment to reflect on the conversation you just had, the email you just read, anything like that. It could be really kind of woven into everyday life, or it could be as formal as, I think Bill Gates, commonly took off a week or two to go and reflect and plan for the future and things like that, which is just lovely if you can do that. And I guess we all could do it if we choose to do it, maybe. Yeah. But then everything in between. And so, yes, you have to reflect to get clear. There's no way to get clear if you're not, taking data that's coming at you all the time and making sense of it. I mean, that's kind of what reflection is making sense of all this data we're getting. And you can't do it when your mind's noisy. And so you have to do it when you're quiet and distractions are away, phones off, and reflecting on everything. And leader standard work is a nice disciplined approach, to be able to build that reflection into a leader's day, week, month, year, quarter, whatever. And it's critical and that's how we learn from our mistakes, quote unquote, too. It's like reflecting back on what didn't work well. Is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, it can be as easy as doing a plus delta at the end of a meeting or at the end of a workshop. What went well? What could have been better? Looking for those learning opportunities. There's one model that I've been exposed to of asking, and thinking back to, what did you expect to happen? What actually happened? Okay, and then was there a difference between those two? If so, why was that difference there? What do we learn from it, and what would we do differently next time? I think that thought process provides interesting structure, and it's the type of thing that, I'll give credit to the firm Value Capture for this, and I'm not sure who they learned it from, but it's the type of thing you can put up on a single piece of paper or a single slide, just to prompt having a little structure instead of just saying, okay, let's reflect. Sometimes people don't know how to articulate that. So I think it's interesting to look at different models for reflection. And
yeah, what I like about that model too is that it kind of heightens your sensitivity to the fact that people have expectations, and I'm not sure that expectations are always hyper healthy, but admitting them and talking about the delta between the expectation and what happened, I think is very, very healthy. And it can certainly surface a whole lot of misperception and miscommunication and all of that, which is, again, the muck that we have to clean away in order to get a clear path and find our way to clarity.
Yeah. So there's, expectations, or we could use language like predictions or hypothesis. What was your hypothesis? That sounds a little wonky, or, you have a science background, so you're comfortable with language.
Hypotheses, yeah. And you know what? It's really interesting. Once we finally figured out problem solving and started teaching it, we mean the collective improvement leadership lean community, the collective group. Once we started talking and framing about it in scientific terms, I was really nervous that people would be kind of a little, oh, that sounds, scary. But over and over, I find people at all levels of organizations kind of into it. They like that idea of a hypothesis, because remember that the old way of not having a hypothesis is this is going to work, and this way is pretty liberating, because it's like, we think that this might work. Let's try it and see if it works. And then if it doesn't work, it's not set in cement. We go back to something else. So it's a great way to get people that would otherwise be resistant to change to kind of go along on the journey. And it just makes so much sense. And it's scientific, even though science is much maligned right now.
By some, yeah.
By some. It's I don't know how you do that. Science is pretty darn good.
Yeah. Yeah. And this idea of testing and seeing what happens, that in some corporate settings, there's this this craving for certainty.
Right.
And, people get tasked with, go prove that this is working. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like good science.
Right. I make a comment in Clarity First that, it's really important to make sure that you don't commingle certainty with clarity, because they're not the same. And it's very unusual to have certainty. I mean, there's really not a whole lot in life that you can say, I am certain, because it doesn't work that way. And so if you can heighten people's sensitivity to the fact that they're even operating from that mindset, then, that can free them up to be more hypothesis thinkers and experimenters. And that's good for everybody.
Yeah. So can you elaborate a little bit on the difference, definitions, the way you see it, certainty versus clarity? It seems like certainty is, I know what's going to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. Or how would you explain that? And then clarity?
That's a good question. So I think of certainty as being a form of arrogance. Because we can't actually ever be certain. I mean, we can be certain once facts present and you've got a pattern. You can inch your way towards certainty, but you're never really certain. And I think that's a fallacy that even in problem solving, I think it's a fallacy that you have to get yourself all the way to a point of certainty before you do anything. You're right. There's such a corporate mindset on it has to work, and this pressure for perfection and things like that just aren't realistic. And so when leaders embrace that certainty doesn't exist, but thoughtful experimentation, we're not suggesting you just, throw spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks. It's like, it's thoughtful experimentation based on data. Then certainty, people can kind of relax and not be so hung up on certainty. To me, clarity is, the opposite of clarity is ambiguity. And so clarity, I define as it's information, any kind of information. It could be visual, it could be verbal, whatever, that's coherent. it kind of hangs together. There's not people going, that's a sign that there's not coherence. It's precise. So there's not a lot of guessing that you have to do. It's not a lot of hard work figuring things out, and it's elegant. So it's easy. Those are the 3 definitions I came up with when I was writing the book on what clarity is. So, or the elements of clarity, or the conditions that clarity has.
Yeah. So it seems like, maybe just repeat back, tell me if I've got this. So if we're thinking about launching some sort of initiative in an organization, somebody might have unfounded certainty that it's going to be a success. And then if you ask, well, how do we know? How is that initiative working? And if someone says, well, I feel like it's going well, that's more ambiguity, where clarity would come from data or facts or.
Right. Yeah, certainly subjective, that I feel. And, the other thing that we see a lot, and you've seen this too, when you're doing any kind of analysis, very often people believe that there's a far more frequent situation than it actually bears out in the data, because bad things feel more frequent. They occupy our attention. They command our attention differently than easy does, and things going well. And so painful things do feel a lot more frequent. So, you can be going down a root cause analysis path, and people think they know, and because it feels that way. And when you look at data, it's like, oh, that wasn't the root cause.
Sure.
And it's just, I love that stuff. It's just so fun to get people's light bulbs going on when they go, wow, I was operating with a bias or an assumption, or from a place of kind of arrogant, thinking I know when I don't, and things like that. I love that part of the work.
Yeah, that's great lessons there. So again, our guest is Karen Martin. Karen, before we wrap up, maybe you can tell the audience about TKMG Academy, what that is, how that sort of builds upon your previous and ongoing work through your firm TKMG. Sorry, I made a mistake in saying that.
That's okay. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. So thank you for asking about it. The Academy was about 10 years in the making. I've been noodling on it for a long time, and didn't really know quite how I wanted to enter the online learning world. I have a lot of concerns about online learning, and I didn't want to fall prey to some of the same mistakes I see others making. And, online learning is tough, because the big gap is application. And it's tough, but I wanted to at least be the one out there, or one of the ones out there that is conveying really good information. So it's maybe cognitive learning initially, but if you apply incorrect information, then that's not really helping anybody. So I wanted to at least get a better, deeper understanding about different topics and different methods and practices than maybe what's out there. And I think we're doing it. The feedback's been very good, and I'm very excited for 2021 and what we've got, kind of up our sleeve for 2021. And it's been a long time in the making. We launched on April 2nd, right after the pandemic hit.
Right.
And so it was very scary to launch during that period, but so far so good.
Better than launching on April 1st when people might.
Well, I was tempted, but I thought, no, that would be ridiculous.
And so the model is people can sign up for individual courses. What are some of the topics that people can go and sign up for? We launched with the kind of basic 4 that I thought were the ones to launch with: value and waste, standard work, problem solving, PDSA based, and daily management systems. Mm-hmm. So we launched with those 4, and now we have 8, soon to be 10, that are out. And so, we have a leadership level 1 leader standard work now. I'm about to launch, probably another month from now, problem solving coaching, which mm-hmm. was very interesting. So what I did with that one is I'm actually trying to be both the coach and the coachee. So both the coach and the problem solver or problem owner. Mm-hmm. We'll find out if people think Did you have different
I'm
clothes or glasses?
Yeah. It's hard because I was on camera instructor on that one, and I had to use voice a little bit, and to make sure people knew, because they're not reading, and so make sure they knew which hat I was wearing at any given time. So it's a little experimental. We'll see how it goes.
Well, good. And I'll make sure there's a link to all of that in the show notes. But the website is
TKMGacademy.com.
Okay, very good. So, Karen, thank you so much for being a guest here. Again, our guest has been Karen Martin, and encourage you to check out. You can find all of her books, The Outstanding Organization, Clarity First, many others. Final question I'm going to throw. Another book, I know you're focused on the Academy. Is there another book possibly coming out of you?
I'm not working on one right now. I have about 5 in mind. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know yet. I have one that's kind of top of mind, but I don't really have the bandwidth for it right now. So we'll see.
All right. Fair enough. Well, Karen, hey, thank you so much for sharing your favorite mistake and having a really good conversation. Some really important topics here.
Thank you for having me. This is a great podcast series. I love it. Thank you.
Thanks.